auzi tu, dragă trăguță, mi-ai cerut ciorac cu panglicuță. Și-ai mai vrea, și-ai mai vrea, și-ai mai vrea, matale, să-ți cumpere neica și sandale.
Hello, I'm David Livianu with my friend Rabbi Haim ASA. Zdravei, bună ziua, and hello, and shalom.
Shalom. Thank you, David, for coming again and filming another segment.
This is going to be story 21, though I mentioned before in the previous story that this would be story 20, but because the previous stories were very long, we divided them in several other stories. So this is story 21, an extraordinary story of rescue and very tragic story that happened in Argentina a number of years ago, and Rabbi Haim ASA is going to talk to us about it. Just to let you know, today is Wednesday, May 29, 2013, in sunny Southern California, city of Fullerton, Orange County. Rabbi,
thank you,
ASA.
David. In the Talmud, it's written that he who saves one life, it is as if he has saved the entire world. And I am happy to share with you a story today which will take us not to Europe, not to America, but to South America, namely Argentina. I have to backtrack for a moment and just explain the background. In 1963, I was appointed to be the Latin American director of the World Union for Progressive Judaism, which is the reform movement of Judaism outside of the USA. In this country we're called the Union for Reform Judaism. Abroad we are designated as the World Union for Progressive Judaism. I don't like the word progressive because often it sounds like some kind of a communist propaganda, but this is the name that was chosen in 1928 by
the founders.
Lily Montagu from London, who was one of the founders of our World Union. Anyway, I was appointed to be the director of the World Union in 1963 upon ordination from the Hebrew Union College, and because I speak Spanish, because I spoke Spanish at that time, they sent me to Latin America, to South America. Headquarters in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In Buenos Aires, Argentina, after approximately 1 year of working with local congregations, I started my own congregation, and this will probably be the subject for another story, but just to show that in 2005 I was given the honor of being the Rabbino Fundador, which means the founding rabbi of Temple Emmanuel or Congregación Emanuel de Buenos Aires.
Rabbino Fundador de la Congregación Emanuel, Rabbi Haim and Elaine, your lovely wife, ASA. That's amazing.
Right. Thank you. Anyway, because of our ties to Buenos Aires, Argentina, my wife Elaine and I have been revisiting our places in Argentina, in Brazil, etc., every 4 or 5 years. And the story I'm going to share with you today took place in 1980.
You were still there?
No. I was already 24 years in Fullerton. But for my vacation,
you went back to visit.
Elaine and I went back to.
So in Argentina, you went from 63 to
66.
So 3 years you were appointed. You were
yes, my contract was for 3 years.
I got you.
I had to repay scholarship I had received from the National Federation of Temple Sisterhoods in America, and and the obligation was to serve 3 years abroad, and when you serve abroad you get very little money, so obviously
A little bit like the Peace Corps.
right, exactly. So in 1980 we went to visit our friends, and we have so many friends in Buenos Aires. Unfortunately, some of them are already
Not
dead
here, yeah.
or
yeah.
dying, but we used to visit and have great time. And before I left Fullerton, a member of my congregation by the name of Mr. and Mrs. members, Mr. and Mrs. Aber, Haber.
Or Haber in American.
Well, yeah, but
they pronounce it Haber.
Haber, yeah.
Haber.
Yeah, asked me for a favor. He said, my nephew is in prison, and he's in prison for political reasons, and I have to tell you what's all about. In 1977, there was a military dictatorship that took over Argentina. Okay, as a matter of fact, I just read in the paper last week that General Vidal, whatever his name was, had died. He was the main dictator at that time. Anyway, the military went crazy because there was a lot of left-wing terrorism, and they thought that the only way to subdue or to suppress the terrorism would be through terrible military oppression. So what happened is that in those 4 years of 77, 78, 79, 80, and some of it in 81, 30,000 young men and women were killed or became desaparecidos, which is the ones we don't know about it.
Yes.
Okay? Now,
Desaparecido.
this young man, Fernando Haber, was the secretary of the student union of a certain university
In Buenos Aires.
which was marked as a proletarian university, which means everybody is suspect that
Right.
they might be-
Pro-socialist, pro-communist.
Exactly.
Yeah. With extreme
And
views.
he was none of those. None of those. He was just the Secretary General of the Student Union. But when they start looking for all the lists of leadership, they thought that he was
They targeted him and they picked him up.
guilty.
Right.
And unfortunately, there's no trial. There's no habeas corpus. There's no accountability. You have to just be taken in and pray that you are not going to be killed. Those who were killed were basically thrown from helicopters into the Rio de la Plata ocean, which is Rio de la Plata is the Gulf that the Atlantic comes into Buenos Aires, Rio de la Plata, and basically they'll be dropped from helicopters, and obviously
They couldn't survive.
no. Now, my friends here at Fullerton told me, please see what you can do to help our nephew. So they gave me a phone number for the father, and the father, believe it or not, he was working for the Ministry of Department of Air Force. He was a meteorologist,
A weather guy.
weather guy, and he was working for the armed forces.
And he couldn't do anything.
He couldn't do anything. And the guy was in prison in probably the worst of the prisons at the time. And of course, every day some of them were being taken and dropped off the helicopters, as I said before, without any case or any kind of a judgment.
No due process.
No due process. Now, when I got there, I consulted a couple of my colleagues. One of them was Rabbi Marshall Meyer, who was very active in the movement of helping those poor Jews and non-Jews who were being imprisoned.
Who disappeared, basically.
And also my successor at Buenos Aires, which at that time was Roberto Gretz. He's now a rabbi in Northern California.
Roberto Gretz.
So I consulted them and he says, well, it's very tough. Don't get involved because you might, before you get to the airport to go back to America, you might be asked to spend some time in investigations and all that. Well, despite of all the warnings, I decided to chance it, and I went to the Ministry of Defense Department of Prisons, which was in the Casa Rosada. Casa Rosada is like our White House, the Pink House, and this was the headquarters of the military. And I went to the Casa Rosada. I asked for an appointment. I told them that I was a visiting rabbi from America. I gave them a long, involved story, which was 100% lies, such as our synagogue in Fullerton has adopted Fernando Aber as a son of our congregation, and the city of Fullerton is very interested in, I built up a case which was basically
bogus.
To
create an impression.
Smoke and
smoke screen.
Smoke screen.
Yeah. But in order to create a little pizzazz and a little.
And also, the minute you announce that somebody from the outside is interested in somebody in prison, then at least there is a record.
Right.
They're not going to throw him off the plane, off the helicopter, or kill him.
They know there's consequences on the world stage.
So I went there and I asked permission to visit him in prison.
Right.
And I came home and I I called my wife from a public telephone. Nobody had cell phones at that time. I called up my wife and said, well, I just went to the Casa Rosada and I filled an application and told them where papa. And I think I'm wasting my time.
You said to your wife?
To my wife. Lo and behold, even before I got home, which was like probably half an hour with a taxi or whatever it is, there was an answer from the Department of Defense, the prison authority, etc., that tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. I have an appointment to visit the prison and to be with the prisoner, etc., etc., etc. This was a total shock to me. In other words,
you didn't expect that.
I not only didn't expect it, it was totally unheard of, because nobody could visit those prisoners.
Right.
The only person that saw the guy, the prisoner, was his father, maybe once a month or whatever it is. Anyway, I immediately called up the father and I said, look, I don't have a vehicle. I don't know where this place is. I don't know how to get there. He says, don't worry. My other son, the younger son, who was probably a high school kid, and I will pick you up
and take you there.
And at 6:30, and we'll drive for an hour to the prison and take you there.
Can we, because we're over the 10 minutes that we're trying to keep our stories in, let's leave this as part one of the story, and we're going to continue immediately with part two, which will become story number 22. So with this,
thank you.
I thank you very much, Rabbi ASA, and the next story will be an immediate continuation of this for the sake of brevity and not making the videos more than 10-15 minutes long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Și-ai mai vrea, drăguță Ana, ca să te îmbrac, măi, conă hramă. Să-ți cumpăr cercei, măi, Ana, dar eu n-am de unde, măi, coadară. Auzi, dragă fata, nechi, dragă, aseară poliua ta miceană, Și acum nu-ți parale să-ți cumpă sandale, buzunarele sunt goale, da. Mai avui, drăguță, încă o băncuță și băui încă o litruță.